they're going to be seen as bragging or talking about themselves too much or selling the book, and they don't want to be salesy. But it's not really about that.
Justine Solomons, and I run Bite the Book, and we are going to be talking today. We've missed off the top of the slide because that happened because we didn't. Anyway, it's how to be yourself online, and we think that this is quite an important topic. We did one of these panels virtually, and it was really popular. So I'm going to introduce our panel in a moment, but just to say that there'll be time for questions at the end if I stop talking nervously like this. Next to me here we have Simon Appleby. Simon Appleby is the director of Bookswarm. Bookswarm built our website, and they run an agency that's the only digital agency dedicated. The only digital agency dedicated to books. Is absolutely brilliant, has a psychic ability to understand what you need, works with lots of authors, big name authors, and publishing people and agents and people like that. Next to him we have Mark Stay, lovely Mark Stay, who is an author and a screenwriter. He has the bestseller Experiment. He writes fantasy books, podcasts as well, and science fiction editor, help people with their science, or lots of editing. And last but by no means least, we have Kelly Weeks on the end, who has worked in marketing. Actually, all these guys worked. Did you work at the same time together at Orion? Similar. So all have worked in publishing and now run their own businesses or are writers in their own right. And Kelly has a background in marketing, but hi Ben, but she's also a mindset coach. So I've turned it into an elevator pitch.
Well done.
Bit for you. So my first question is to Simon. So, okay, Simon, why should people get themselves out there?
Okay, so it occurred to me just a minute ago actually to count how many book fairs I've been to, and I think in terms of London Book Fair, not including the virtual one, this is my 15th.
Wow.
Which suddenly makes me feel old. And in that time, which is obviously more than 15 years, the industry has changed a huge amount. When I came in, it was the beginnings of the ebook revolution. Social media was relatively nascent phenomenon. It certainly wasn't a mainstream phenomenon. And if you were a traditionally published author all that time ago, you had a reasonable expectation that your publisher would be responsible for your marketing. So they might create a website for you, they might help you to navigate Twitter, they would organise events for you, they would take nice photographs of you and all this stuff. And as the industry has evolved, the reality is that unless you are Stephen King or someone of equivalent stature, any author, whether they're traditionally or self-published, needs to take ownership of their own online persona, both for the benefit of their long-term career development, because most publishers are not giving out multi-book deals. It's, if you get a 2-book deal, you're generally doing really well. And because those publishers aren't going to do those things for you, because they can't. They just don't have the people. Publishing is making more money by publishing more books with fewer people. So if you are an author, then your moment in the sun is very brief, and you're sharing it with however many other authors are being published by that same publisher that month. And very quickly the clouds will cover the sun again, and you will be not at the front of your publisher's mind. So great to have that moment, while whatever they will do for you is important, but you need to be thinking about your own online strategy as a long-term thing, and that means websites and socials and all of that, which is what we're here to talk about.
Brilliant. So very, very important is the answer.
Yeah.
And you have to take responsibility for it. Mark, can you talk a little bit, please, about your journey and your take on this subject of getting yourself online?
Yeah, it is important. I'm here for the people who don't want to be themselves online, because I know this is something that puts a lot of people off. They kind of think, do I have to be some sort of Z-list celebrity on social media in order to make this work? And the answer is you really don't. I mean, I started as a bookseller and worked in publishing, and I was there when every author wanted a website, and then when they got it, they didn't know what to do with it, kind of thing. And it's you can set up a very simple one-page. I mean, this is something I say to every author, and do this today. Just set up a single page with your name, a little bio, a photograph, and if you've got a book, a link to your books, because then when you go out querying, you can steer people towards it. Then you are in control of the message. You've got your own little square of the internet. That is all yours. Now, you mentioned I do a podcast called The Bestseller Experiment. My co-presenter on that, Mark DeVoe, he's a musician. And he had a MySpace page which had 80,000 followers. And then along comes Facebook. They're all gone overnight. And he didn't know where they went. And he says 80,000. The number changes every time. But it's one of these things where if you have your own corner, and maybe a newsletter as well, which I would also urge you to set up, if you've got a little corner of the internet, that is your own. It's everything, and then it's you control the messages people find you, your SEO, your search engine optimization. When people Google it, they're much more likely to find your website rather than that picture of you on Instagram at karaoke off your face, which might not give the best impression. So, I've seen these things evolve, and I've got my own little website for me, but I've also, for the series of books that I've got, and Simon set this up, because this is a series called The Witches of Woodville, and it's kind of different to stuff that I've written before, and I wanted it to be its own thing. And it's set in a little fictional village, and I said to Simon, can you set it up like it's the village website? And it's run by a fictional character called Araminta Cranberry, who she writes the newsletters for me. She's able to boast about the books in a way that I would find kind of cringeworthy. So it can be done. I mean, we had someone on the podcast recently, an author called Jane Davis, who writes Regency romance. And if you look her up online, you'll see a picture of a woman on a chaise longue reading, dressed like Jane Austen. That's not Jane. That's not Jane Davis, and Jane Davis isn't her name. But she's built this, she's become the go-to person for resources for Regency romance and that kind of thing. And if you look for an author photo, it's a picture of her holding up a book in front of her face. Yeah. So it's important to be out there. It's important to be on social media, but don't go all in on social media. Have your own little corner of the internet. And it doesn't have to be you. You can have a persona that you can sell your books for you.
So it doesn't have to be you.
Yeah.
But it could be you.
Yeah.
And we're talking about websites here, but Kelly, your background, although you know about websites, is about recently has been about social media.
Yeah.
So why is that good for authors? Why is social media good for authors, and how's it changed?
Well, first of all, I'd caveat it with exactly what Simon and Mark have said, that although I'm quite evangelical about social media and all its opportunities, I would also urge you to have a website and ideally to have a newsletter, because as you'll see with the news, with Musk taking over Twitter and Facebook shuts down accounts of their own free will, you're not in control when it's somebody else's space. So I'd always back it up with, if you're going to be on social media, make sure you have another presence too, where you're kind of in control of that data. But I think with social media, it's not about that you need to be on it, but actually that there's huge opportunities. And I get a lot of people who come to me and go, oh God, I've got to be on social media, and it feels like a really heavy marketing task. But actually, it's a huge opportunity. If you think back, the opportunity for you to kind of come in direct contact with readers was really rare. It might be that you did an event or a signing and a few people would come, or someone would write you a fan letter. But actually now you can be in contact with people who love your books and love the topics that you're writing about all over the world, and you can build those relationships. So that's why I'm particularly passionate about it. And it's not just about connecting with your readers, it's being part of the wider kind of reader publishing community. You never know who you're going to meet. I mean, I've got people in this room who I've worked with, who I've only met online, or that's how I met them. So you never know whether you're going to be able to talk to someone who runs a podcast or is organising a festival. And if you're a bit visible on social media, that means they're more likely to have your name in mind when they're coming to think about things to do.
Yeah, and I think also authors shouldn't assume that the publishers know more than they do.
Yeah. And the crucial thing with today's kind of careers is you might have different books at different publishers, and you might also move publishers. So you being in control of your social media and your website and your newsletter means even if you move publisher, you take your audience with you. You're in control of the message, and you're in control of being able to access your readers. So in a way, it's quite exciting because you're really empowered with what you can do.
And I think you've got more time. I just want to, when we were talking about this the other day, you said when Twitter first came out, you had a conversation.
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, you never really know how it's going to go. So I remember having a conversation. I was in-house at Hodder then. When Twitter first launched, we actually had a conversation about whether it could be some kind of internal communications tool, whether we could use it as like a bit of like an intranet to talk to each other. So you also never really know how things are going to evolve. So I think it's just quite fun kind of being present and having a play with things and seeing how they grow and where the opportunities are.
Yeah, so don't assume you know less. I think people put publishers and agents, to any publishers and agents in the room, on pedestals. And also, it's really hard to write a book, and you should feel very proud of yourself for being able to do that.
Yeah.
And credit your...
And I think this comes up a lot as well of people often people who talk to me feel very uncomfortable about being very visible on social media. They worry that they're going to be seen as bragging or talking about themselves too much or selling the book, and they don't want to be salesy. But it's not really about that. It's about kind of having conversations. You can talk about your book without saying, here's my book, go and buy it on Amazon. And I often say to people, you've written your book for a reason, whether that's to entertain people or maybe it's to help people, whatever your reason was for putting it out in the world, it can't do its job if no one knows it exists. So if you want your book to help people or to entertain people, you have to find ways of telling them that it's there.
Brilliant. And Simon, one of the ways of doing that is building a website, as we've said, and having a little corner of the internet. What kind of things do you get authors to think about when they commission a website?
I think there are two big things where the conversation tends to focus. One of them is about being realistic about how much you can give to it. It's a bit like gardening. If you have the time, you can make a half-acre garden look amazing. But if you haven't got the time, it will go to hell pretty quickly. So if someone commissions something that's beyond their ability to maintain it, it's not in the notes, I'm just making this up.
No, it's all right. I like the garden analogy.
But, if realistically all you can do is maintain a little courtyard, and it's better to maintain a little courtyard well than it is to try and, lose control of a half-acre plot. So being real about how much new content you can originate in terms of blogs and news articles and adding reviews and all of that is very important. And we do essentially single-page author websites for people who, feel reasonably pragmatic about that and don't say, oh, well, I want this blog and I want people to have comments enabled. And the other thing I think is, and Mark has touched on this already, is about the issue of representation. I think there is a spectrum between total authenticity and complete artifice, which everyone needs to decide where they are on that spectrum. Mark has effectively decided to get a fictional part of his personality to big himself up, which I can say works really well. And you read the emails and it's great, and he's written the biography of that site in the third person. On the other hand, you can go full authentic, and as well as talking about the books, you can talk about the rest of your life and, whatever your hobbies or personal passions are. Most people will settle for somewhere, as in many things in life, somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, where they will be thinking, I want to share the things that are relevant to why I wrote this book. I did a call with a new author client 2 days ago, whose thing is football, and the books are fiction related to football. And he's a relatively old guy who's been involved in football in many, many different respects, coaching, refereeing, being a football parent, fan, blah, blah. And one of the things he said, which I wrote down at the time, was he wants to talk about himself in the third person. But the bits of content that he'd given me were all written in the first person. And I've subsequently gone back to him and said, I really think that might be the wrong thing to do. Because if your passion is what's animating this entire project, then don't hide that passion behind an invisible third person talking about you.
Which is why, Simon, you are brilliant at what you do, because you understand
he might not take that advice, but we shall see.
You understand publishing. You've worked in this industry for a long time, and you're not just building websites. You're helping people's dreams come true. Well, sorry to be cheap, flattery, but it's true. Really, he really understands. Hermione, you've worked with Simon, he's absolutely great. I'm blushing. Are you blushing? I'm embarrassing you. Sorry. What kind of things do people talk about on social media, or should they be talking about on social media?
Well, it's not so much as what should you talk about, but I'll tell you the way of thinking it through. So when I work with people, I start with, you need to think about who your target audience is. So, this is relevant at all stages of the publishing process, but who have you written your book for? what are their interests, what's going to make them interested in your book. Then you think about your positioning, what you want to say about your book, what you want to say about yourself. And that's where you can really decide which topics in your personal life you might want to share or not. So a lot of people worry that they have to share what they've had for breakfast or something. You're in charge. You can set the boundaries. So, like Justine, she's got me into cold water swimming, so I quite often talk about sea swimming. The majority of my content is hopefully quite helpful advice for authors, but I touch on sea swimming and a few personal interests because that helps people get to know me. But there's a lot that I don't talk about. I very rarely talk about my children. It's quite important for me to keep them off social media. So you're in control. So once you've thought about what you want to say about your book and yourself and what topic areas, and you've thought about your target audience, then try and think about where's the overlap. So what are the things that you're interested in that your audience are also likely to be interested in, and sort of focus there. Try and find ways of kind of bringing your book to life in different ways. So that might be, if you're in non-fiction, maybe it's kind of helpful advice or tips or anecdotes from your research. If it's fiction, can you explain how you stumbled upon that topic or what is that really interests you, or bring to life particular characters. And I think also it's quite interesting to take people on the publishing journey. So people quite often come to me really late. Often it's my book's being published in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I want to build my social media presence. Building your presence online takes a really long time unless you're going to throw a lot of money advertising at it. So take people on that journey. Start, even before necessarily you've got a deal, but you know what your book is, or talk, because you can share that kind of information as well. You can talk about writing it. There's all sorts of lovely publishing moments that we sort of take for granted, but are really interesting to other people. So like revealing the cover, or the first time you hold a finished copy, or when you see it out in the real world. There's all those lovely touch points that are all saying, here's my book, but it's not saying, here's my book at £6 on Amazon. And also think about how you can engage. So the other thing to think about with social media, it's not a broadcast channel. It's not just what you're putting out there. Remember, you're building relationships and a community. So you're really wanting to have conversations. So try and think about how you can engage your community. Is that asking questions of them? Is that getting their opinion? How can you bring that kind of conversation to life too?
Yeah, exactly. So the first tweet shouldn't be buy my book.
No.
Yeah, and so I heard it described as block, jab.
But equally, and it's getting a balance. So you don't want to sell too much, but then also you can go too far the other way. You can be so busy helping people or just sharing really lovely content that you forget to tell people that you've got a book. And actually, your followers, if they've come along with you on this journey, they're going to want to know. So there are authors that I follow purely because I'm just found them quite interesting. I'll be a bit annoyed if they don't tell me their book's out, because I am waiting to find out when I can go and read it, because from everything that they've told me so far, it sounds really interesting. So you've got to make sure you do still sell it. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and it's going to feel different at different stages of the year. So when you're around launch, for example, you're going to talk about your book loads because it's about to come out and you've got a lot of information. But if you're a year out of publication, then you're probably not going to talk about your book so much because there's not that much new to tell, and that's where you might rely more on other types of content.
Brilliant. Okay, so Mark, can you tell us, as an author, the kind of things you do to promote yourself online?
So every Monday morning I sit down and schedule my tweets for the week, because I do it for the podcast, and I kind of, while I'm there, I might as well do it for myself. So I bring up TweetDeck, and I just do one tweet a day of buy my book, because I think, as you say, that when the book comes out, you kind of carpet bombing, social media, and you will still get people going, I didn't know you had a book out. So you think you're overdoing it, but the way, especially the way Twitter works now, it's a disaster area. You don't know who's seeing what. So I do make sure there are those buy my book things out there, and Monday morning I sit down and schedule all those things. But then my first tweet of the day is, because I write from about 7:30 to about 9:30 in the morning, and my first tweet of the day is my word count. And I usually put a funny little GIF. Yeah. Well, we have a thing on the podcast called the 200 Word Challenge, where we try and write 200 words a day, every day. And so I do that and I share
Saturdays and Sundays as well.
Yeah. Christmas Day, every day. Yeah.
Like Stephen King, he writes every day, doesn't he?
Who?
That's someone.
I don't think he's very successful.
So we do, and people join in, and that's engaging. And that allows me to step away from Twitter. And then kind of dip in when I get notifications, because Twitter is the great time suck. Social media is the great time suck, and you can get drawn into arguments and stuff like that. So I kind of stepped away from that. And the other thing is, it is best foot forward. You are your positive self on there as well. I know a lot of authors can get very political or angry about certain issues, and that's fine. But I just found what happens with that is you spend the whole day explaining yourself when you could be using your energy, doing something else. So I think as well, you are a brand. I know we talked about earlier, you don't have to be yourself online, but if you are, or if you're putting a brand of yourself online, you're representing that brand. So, if you go around picking fights with people, then it's going to reflect badly on you as well. So it is, I try to be an ambassador for the books, essentially.
Yeah, and try not to be negative and to help others as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you mentioned Gareth.
Gareth L. Powell, science fiction author. He's brilliant. He's one of these guys who he'll say, it's 8 o'clock, I'm at a loose end, ask me anything. And he's got thousands of followers off the back of that. Now, he's an award-winning, best-selling science fiction author, so, people are drawn to him. But if you start that today, you here now, and make yourself, a resource for your genre and reflect the passion for the stuff that you write, then people will be attracted to that.
And Kelly, you were saying you don't actually have to, in helping people, you don't need to have a podcast to help people. You can help people in lots of ways.
I think that's because when we chatted before, you were saying about kind of giving people kind of helpful kind of writing advice and author advice. Help looks lots of different ways. It's not necessarily about giving lots of practical advice about how to be a writer or things you're experiencing. Help could just be recommending a book. So like if you've read a really good novel that you completely love, share a review about that. You're helping your readers who probably would enjoy having a good recommendation from you, and you're helping that other author. So don't think of help as a really kind of always has to be very, very practical. It's more just kind of what's there that's kind of adding to that kind of conversation.
Exactly. Do you think authors, Mark has mentioned that he does his tweet deck every morning. On a Monday morning. Do you think authors should plan their content? Yeah.
I've got an author, self-published author client who I've had for many, many years, who's Canadian historical fiction. Shannon Selin. And every Friday, without fail, for it's probably about 12 years old, that website. It's really been there for a long time. And she uploads a new blog post about something to do with Napoleonic Wars or Napoleonic history or Napoleon in general, because that's her thing. And every Friday, the email newsletter goes out without fail. And it's one piece of content a week, but it's one really good piece of content a week. And, it doesn't have to be weekly. It can be fortnightly, monthly. It's essentially content marketing, because it's genuinely useful mini essays about something which, if they're interested in social customs during the Napoleonic Wars or what happened to Napoleon's grandchildren or whatever, they may well come to her book through that topic. But equally, it's of general interest to the people who are already her readers. So she's servicing her readers and potentially attracting new readers, even though the book has been out for ages. Because the other thing is, a book is new to you. A book is new if it's new to you. It doesn't have to be front list to be interesting and exciting. Fiction doesn't really go off some non-fiction dates, obviously, but you can still find new people and get them excited about a book that was published 10 years ago if it's new to them.
Yeah. So you're planning on content. Nicola May was coming in here for. I don't know whether she's in here.
I think she has to go off to. There's another
one as well. But Nicola doesn't plan content. She does it more scattergun.
Yeah, I think it depends on.
And she's done very well
on your personality type. But as Mark said, it can be a real time suck. So social media is, one of the many enemies of productivity in terms of writing books, but in terms of for work reasons, I often have to open social media to, find so-and-so's Facebook page or Twitter link to include in their website. The number of times I open it and 10 minutes later think, why did I come? It's like walking into a room and going, why did I come in here? I do that all the time. I close Facebook and think, oh Christ, no, I opened it for a reason. I've forgotten what it was. So, if that's like that for me, and if you're trying to write 1,500 words a day, then it must be absolutely impossible.
It's context changing, isn't it? Yeah. We were saying that it's very important for authors to take responsibility for stuff, Mark. But now, as an author, being published by a publishing house, you're published by Simon Schuster. Yeah. How much do you do? How much does the publisher do?
Well, I kind of rolled in and did it all myself.
Yeah,
because as Simon said earlier, that there have been great redundancies in publishing. I mean, I took voluntary redundancy from Orion about 4 or 5 years ago. And the people left behind are doing the job of 3, 4, 5 people sometimes. So if you're that lead title, super lead title, you will get all that care and attention. But below that, you're kind of left on your own. So it is up to you to go to organise events and festivals and all that kind of stuff. So you kind of have to learn to do this stuff yourself. And it's, I think, if you're sitting there on your hands waiting for your publisher to call, you're going to be sitting there waiting for a very long time. Also, though, I think when you're in the pre-publication process, a lot of authors will expect some kind of publicity or marketing report or something like that. I would say go to them, say, I want to do library events, I want to do bookshop events, I want to go on podcasts, I want to do this and that. Because then at least you are giving them a steer. You're giving them some idea of what kind of person you are. Or you could say, I'm kind of shy, I don't really want to do that, but I don't mind doing stuff online or in Zoom calls or things like that.
Things, yeah.
Give them a steer of what kind of person you are, and that will help them place you in their kind of, in their festivals and events and social media and what have you.
Good advice. I mean, I think that some authors in here, and maybe others as well, will find all the social media stuff a bit overwhelming. So Kelly, which channel should authors use?
There's no answer to that, really annoyingly. It really depends on you, your book, and who your audience is. So all the channels have enormous audiences. So you can pretty much guarantee that there is an audience for your book on each of the channels. So it's much more about being clear with where you think the majority of them might be, but also where you might be comfortable. So there's no point me saying, go and be on TikTok if the thought of doing 4 short form videos a day is too much for you, or you don't know how to put yourself out on video. If you are very visual and Instagram could work very well for you, you might not like Twitter, which is much more kind of interactive and quicker and rapid. So you've really got to think about what's going to suit you. So how frequently you want to post, because again, the different, like Twitter, ideally you want to be on it multiple times a day, or certainly have tweets going out multiple times a day, because the way the algorithm works, you're going to be missed if you just put out 1 tweet a week. Something like Instagram and Facebook, you can do it less frequently. So it's really about what you want to achieve, sadly. But yeah, just the other thing I would say though, is if you're looking at it from the outside and you've not really explored any of these channels, don't write them off without having a go, because I often say, think of the channel that you can be comfortable on. Well, if you haven't done anything, you're going to look at any of them and go, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. There's masses here, or I can't get my head around that. So maybe just sign up to them and have an account and just sit in them, watch other authors, see what other people are doing, and think not necessarily what you could do right now, but what you think you could get comfortable with if you actually gave it some effort and some focus to it.
Yeah, and don't be too afraid as well. I said some people just say, I hate social media, but actually you can.
And I think that's a reframing attitude as well, because
why you're a brilliant coach.
Sorry, yes, people hate it and it can take up a lot of time, but it is an amazing tool. And if you think of, I can't remember all the stats up to date, but there's 2 billion people on Instagram. If a publisher came to you and said, I'm going to do an advert in this magazine and it's going to reach 300,000 people, you'd be quite pleased with that. So you've got the opportunity to reach huge audiences, and almost every topic and niche are existing in those channels. So there's really, really huge opportunity. And also, the world is changing. I'm sorry, I should know this stat, but what we're seeing is that kind of younger generations coming through are turning to social media first for search before they're going for things like Google. So a lot of the channels, so like Instagram and TikTok, you'll start seeing people talking about SEO in captions. So people are going onto Instagram looking for, horror books, and actually using it to search as well as just following people that they're interested in. So embrace it if you can, but have it in partnership with something that you control yourself, like the web and newsletter.
Simon, when we spoke about the various channels, you were talking a bit about LinkedIn and community as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn is an often overlooked one, especially for non-fiction authors. And I've seen some authors doing really good, are aimed at a community of interest. So you have to either create that community or go and find that community, or both. We're just starting an author website for a guy who's got a second non-fiction book coming out, who's a specialist on sustainable agriculture. So I should be learning all about this. And I looked at it and I thought, it didn't look terribly exciting. he's got this really basic looking blog. But once he gave me a login and I got in there, he has written, since he launched it, 390 posts and had 12,000 comments. And I'm not talking spam, I'm talking proper, good quality, moderated, thoughtful, interesting comments from engaged readers that he has then replied to. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do that or could do that, but if you have domain expertise and you make yourself available to your audience, then a website or a social channel or both is a really good way to do that. No one talked about Substack today. That's having a bit of a moment especially in terms of non-fiction authors. I've got a few non-fiction authors who've moved their blogging to Substack because they feel that's a good place to go, where people are kind of going to consume factual content. Time will tell how well it stays the course, because sometimes these things sort of flare and fizzle out. The other example I've got is it's a novelisation of a Japanese computer game, a game I'd never heard of, because I'm not that kind of computer gamer. It's the first time any of this studio's games have ever been novelised, and the author who's written it has got us to do a little microsite, and it's very sort of manga looking and really quite funky. And since that's been announced, the level of engagement through the website, not even in terms of anything particularly social, just in terms of people filling in the contact form, there's a real strong enthusiasm, because that game has a really dedicated fan base. So this book is not going to be a bestseller. It's not going to be competing with, Stephen King or George R.R. Martin. But to its base, it is the biggest piece of news they've had in a long time in terms of fantasy fiction. And, if you can if you can harness that enthusiasm in a niche, then...
So Mark, you were saying that you were doing more with your personal blog, but sometimes it doesn't go quite as to plan. So you were doing stuff about Lego.
Oh, this was TikTok.
On TikTok.
Was,
you described, how did you feel when you were on TikTok? You said...
I've got Lego followers, so yeah.
I think you could create your book in Lego.
Oh, done.
Simon would like to build your book in Lego.
Well, yeah, if I had the time, I had enough Lego, but yeah.
It was, and we're talking about, I was getting a few hundred and suddenly 50,000 in a day. It was crazy. So then you kind of you really reach a tipping point, and it's kind of the algorithm says, "Oh, Lego people, go here." Oh, I don't want them.
Lego talk.
Lego talk. Yeah. I have one more question, just asking, what about fear of doing things wrong? And Kelly, don't worry about it, right?
Yeah, a lot of people kind of, I guess, overthink each post and really worry if they're going to put something out there that you're going to get a backlash to or something. I think, so I often say, don't say anything that you wouldn't want to have your name quoted in the Daily Mail having made this statement. Things do last forever, so although you can delete something, people are quick with the screen grabs. And I think the point earlier about, let's just, make it a nice space, be positive. If you're the brand ambassador for your books, be positive on social. So from that point of view, don't go and say anything really kind of inflammatory. But in terms of just getting it right or wrong, don't overthink it. Like, social media posts do not last long. You need to do lots. And a lot of people get bogged down in trying to craft the perfect post, and it can take days. And actually the algorithm moves so fast that people will probably spend about 3 seconds looking at your post, which is like a harsh reality, and then they've kind of moved on. So done is better than perfect, which Justine wrote down as dull is better than perfect, which is not right. But I did something recently. I did a reel. There's a glitch in Instagram at the moment with reels. I don't know if anyone else is finding it. And if I post some drafts, it keeps ditching part of my text. And I did this reel, and I was really pleased with it, and it posted, and part of my caption had gone, and I was like, oh, it doesn't quite make the sense that I wanted it to. But I had about 3 authors interact with it within about a minute, and because engagement is key, I was like, well, I've got to leave it now. But actually, it really resonated with people, and people were interacting, and it didn't matter that 2 of my bullet points were missing. So also, just don't overthink it. Kind of just
done is better than dull.
Yeah.
And done is better than perfect. Okay, so very quickly, I'm going to get your top tips, and then if anybody's got any questions, Kelly, what are your top tips?
Start early. So don't wait till your book is just about to come out, or you finish the book and then you turn your hand to your social media. Start as early as you can, so you can take people along the journey. Don't overthink it. Obviously, think a bit about how you're going to approach it all, but don't overthink each post, and try and have fun and try and think of it actually as an opportunity rather than, oh my God, a piece of marketing admin that I have to do.
I think if you're sitting there thinking, start today. That is the thing, start this today. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I haven't even finished the first draft of my book, what do I write about? I think, as we've said, find the passion, find the thing that's going to draw readers to you. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know what to write about, there's a brilliant website called Answer the Public, which scrapes Google. So if you want to write about Napoleon, put Napoleon into Answer the Public, and it will tell you what the questions that people are asking on Google today in the UK about Napoleon. And it will be, was Napoleon really only 5'1"? And you can go, actually, you can do a blog, say, actually, because the French have different inches, he's actually taller than we, blah, blah. And then Google goes, oh, look, they're asked these questions, and someone's given them answers, they put you together. And that kind of thing, there's no social media involved, it's just your blog and SEO, and it works. It really, really, I've been using it for the last year or so, and it really, really works. And don't underestimate YouTube. I know everyone writes it off, but it's part of the Google family. And again, that whole SEO thing, if you're answering questions that people are asking, Google will bring people to you. That's their business.
Brilliant. Simon?
I can't remember what I said
You
last time.
said it's a long game.
Oh, yes.
And you write books, etc.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I remember. This is my anecdote from a long time ago. It is a long game. Don't expect success overnight, which is why you have to start quickly. Start as soon as you can and allow these things to build. It takes time for search engines to get hold of you, but also never sort of think you've got past the point where it's worth engaging with booksellers, engaging with readers, engaging with other writers. Many years ago, it was in a Books Etc., which kind of dates this story. I was in a bookshop at lunchtime with my boss, and he was probably looking at horror books. And we were just on our way out, and Nigel Slater walked in. I walked up to the till and said, "Hello, I'm Nigel Slater. Can I sign some books?" And they were, of course, delighted to do this. And he signed about 10 copies of something and went on his merry way, and I bought one. So he generated a sale there and then. And this was 2008, 2009, so it's a long time ago. But the point stands, I think, don't ever think that the small things aren't worth continuing to do.
Books.
No,
Nicola May, when we were talking about this, said she's always responded to her readers, and that's why she's you're never that too important. Amazing, right? Really interesting information here. Do we have any questions? What's your name?
Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, everybody. So if you're a writer of various genres, I know it's important to find your audience, but how do you find your audience when the book can vary, the books that you're writing vary? And so what I'm not shy or anything like that. I'll go on whatever, but I've just been posting different things about books or about words or about word puzzles, games, anything, that kind of a thing. Is that like a bad move because it's so varied? Should I focus on the book at hand, and then maybe around the topic of that book at hand, or?
If I can get that one, I bumped into an author client today who has a similar problem. He's extremely eclectic over his publishing career. Books about heavy metal, books about Jewishness, books about Kinder Surprise Egg translations of instructions. It's very, very random, but good books. And he basically said the same thing, which is, it's very hard to know how to be eclectic online. And I think there's a sort of two-part answer. One is, when the book is front list, when it's new, when it's just out, I think you have to lean in primarily to the topic of that book and try and make sure that you're giving people hooks to understand what you're primarily focusing on at that point. And I think that would be true on the socials as well as in terms of website content. But I think the joy of a website is that you can afford still to be a bit more, you can afford to embrace your eclecticism, and it's perfectly fine to say, I'm interested in all kinds of things, and I've written about this and I've written about that. And lately, the thing I'm really interested in is blah. And then, it's also fine to create content, broader content as well, depending on how you're presenting yourself. So there is no right answer. Don't be ashamed of being eclectic, is I think what I would say.
Nice.
And readers aren't set in one.
Exactly.
People don't just read one.
I read a history book and then a science fiction book.
There's some amazing people in this room. I'd love you all to try and talk to each other or try and speak to someone you haven't met before. If you haven't been to Bite the Book,